We also learned that Americans share 3 things. What are those 3 things that Americans share? Aaron, tell me one. Holidays. Colin, tell me another. Monuments. And then one more. Zari. Traditions. Not all of them. That would be more holidays and monuments. Smith. Patriotism. Patriotism is what? Victoria. Love of country. What do those holidays and those monuments remind us of? What do those holidays and those monuments remind us of? Everybody's able to find these answers. What do those holidays and monuments remind us of? I'm looking for somebody who has not answered yet. So thank you, Smith and Victoria, but I'm looking for somebody who has not answered yet. What?
For me too.
What? Did you answer a question? Yes. So, Carla, why do we share those holidays and monuments? What do they remind us of?
It makes people remember the monuments are.
Somebody can help her out. It's in there. Find the key words. What are the key words in that question? Smith, can you tell us the key words in that question? Don't tell me the answer, but what are the key words in that question that I just asked?
Remember.
Remember. Also, what else? So look for the word remember. What other key words were in my question? I said, what do monuments and holidays help us remember? Ethan, what are the other key words in that question? Colin, what are the other key words in that question?
Holiday and monument.
Holidays and monuments. So look for the words, holidays and monuments. Look for the word remember, or maybe even celebrate. And there will be your answer. Carla?
Monuments all over the United States help Americans, the people, and the events that shape our events.
So monuments are there to help us celebrate what? What 2 things do monuments help us to remember and celebrate? Kingston? Important people and important events in our history. What about holidays? What are they there for? What do they help us remember or celebrate? Kingston? Okay, what is it? Important events in history. Did you think of that answer all on your own? Where was it? It was in the book. So sometimes I just don't understand this, because sometimes you guys won't answer questions when you have to think about it, but then a lot of times when the answer is right in front of you, you won't answer the questions. Either way, you have to answer the questions. That's what you're here for. Okay, let's turn the page. Then we talked about the first Americans. Who were the very, very, very first Americans? Ethan. The Native Americans, not the Europeans, because the Europeans were the first to come to America and do what? Victoria?
Slavery.
Well, they brought slaves with them, but they were the first ones to come to America and do what? Smith?
And settle.
Settle. Good. Settle means to come into a new place and start a new town, village, whatever. Good. Then we learned that where did Americans live before 1920? What type of area did most Americans live before 1920? Zadie?
In the country.
In the country, which is also called what?
The countryside.
The country. But what is it called? What type of area is the countryside? Aaron? Not an urban area. We haven't even, nope, not urban. Look at what the definition of urban is. What is the definition of urban? It's in your book. What's another word for urban areas? Aaron, look in your book. What's another word for urban areas? Look in your book. What's another word for urban areas? So, urban areas, what's another word? Look at what's in what's in commas after, or cities. So urban areas, another word for that is cities. So if they lived out in the countryside, did they live in urban areas before 1920? So what type of area did they live in, Aaron? Rural areas, which means areas in the countryside. Well, now we're going to read about how that changed, because we know by looking at the timeline after 1920, most Americans lived in cities. Well, how did that change? Let's read to find out. So face shields on. Carla, go ahead. We're starting with from cities to suburbs. Every single person needs to have their finger ready to follow along. Make sure your vocabulary notebook should be under your textbook, because I don't want that distracting you. And Carla, I'll let you know when to go ahead and go. When I see everybody's finger, that's when I'll tell Carla that we're ready. Zari, remember where your camera should be pointing. Okay, Carla, go ahead. Follow along with her. Carla, you have to go slow and read every word slowly and correctly.
From cities to suburbs.
Suburbs.
Suburbs. As city grew, some people choose to move to suburbs.
Suburbs.
Towns or small city near a large city.
Okay, Carla, what's number 7? What's our 7th vocabulary word?
Suburbs.
Suburbs. Suburbs. If we look at that word and chunk it, let's cover up the second syllable, and we have S-U-B, which sounds like sub. Then if we cover up the first syllable and only look at the second syllable, we have herbs. So if we put sub and herbs together, it sounds like sub-herbs. Sub-herbs. But sub-herbs isn't the word. So we put them together and we smooth it out to make suburbs. So what is the word, Carla?
Suburbs.
Suburbs. And what is a suburb, Carla?
A suburb is a town in a small city.
That's not it. What else is it? Because that would mean pretty much any small town is a suburb, but they're not, because a suburb is a town or small city that is
near a large city.
good. So suburbs are towns or cities. Oops, I'm sorry. Small towns or cities. So put in that word small. Small towns or cities. Remember, cities is not C-I-T-Y-S because it has consonant Y. So that means we change the Y to an I and add E-S. Small towns or cities near large cities. So we have several suburbs around here because Memphis is a large city. So the small, yes, Colin?
Shouldn't it be towns or small cities?
Well, it's small goes with towns or and cities. So we don't need to say, because then it would be small towns or small cities, but we don't need that because we know small towns or cities means small towns, small cities. So Memphis is a large city. We have several suburbs like Germantown and Collierville and Cordova and Bartlett and South Haven in Mississippi and West Memphis in Arkansas and Millington and Arlington. Maybe even a little bit Oakland and Drummond, but not quite. They're not quite suburbs because they're not close enough. They're close. They're kind of suburbs. They're like suburbs of the suburbs. Because the suburbs are really more close by, but they are they're like suburbs of the suburbs. So they're towns or cities near, small towns or cities near large cities. Okay, well now let's find out why people chose to move from the big cities out to the suburbs. Why didn't they stay in the cities? Why didn't they move to the rural areas? Well, let's find out. Carla, keep reading. Everyone, finger ready to follow along. Put your notebook under your textbook. Find where she left off. And Carla, I'll let you know when everybody's ready. Go ahead, Carla.
In the 1950s, many families moved from large cities to suburbs. One of the first
Suburban
area in the United States was Lawrytown.
Chunk it, Carla. So find the syllables, cover up all but one syllable at a time. And we've got town. So how would we say, listen, how would we say town if we put it all together, smushed it together, and smoothed it out? Can somebody help her out? How would we say town if we put it all together and smoothed it out? Aaron, loud so everyone can hear you. Levittown. Good. So do you see, Carla and everybody else, how I put all those sounds, Levittown, together? I smushed them and then I smoothed them out. So it's not Levittown, it's Levittown or Levittown. Keep going.
Was Levittown, New York.
Keep going.
Today, more than 40.
Not 40.
Hmm?
Not 40. Just
4/50
fifths. It's not 50. There's no Y. So Carla, make sure you're doing that thing where you're reading the beginning and guessing the end. So it's not 4/50s, it's 4/5.
More than 4/5 of Americans live in cities or in suburbs. Like Levittown, suburban areas today are usually more spread out than cities. Instead of living in tall apartment buildings, most people in suburban area live in houses with yards.
Now this is a little different because we live in a big city, or well, some of us do. Some of us might live in the suburbs or the suburbs of the suburbs. But do most people in Memphis live in really big, tall, high-rise apartment buildings? No, because our city is a little different. They're talking more about like New York City. If you think of New York City, well, yes, most people do live in really big, tall apartment buildings. But when you get to Memphis, which isn't quite as big, and it's also more spread out, we can have that suburban life, like with the houses with the yard, while also living in the city. So that still doesn't quite answer why everybody might want to move to the suburbs. But we definitely know why people in big cities like New York and Chicago and Los Angeles would want to move to the suburbs. Why would that be? Why would people in really, really big cities like New York and Chicago and Los Angeles want to move to the suburbs? Ethan? It's more spread out, which means they have more space. If you have kids and a dog, do you want them all crammed into your little apartment in a high-rise where if you have to take the dog out for a walk, you have to go all the way down the stairs and then walk down the street to find a green area for them to go to the bathroom? Not really. I mean, some people don't mind, but some people, they want their dog, they want to be able to open the door. I know I do. I want to be able to open the door and let her out and keep going about my business. And then when she's ready, she comes back in. And when you have kids, you want them to have a place to play that's outside. Well, think about big cities. They have parks, but what do they have everywhere else? Smith?
Buildings.
Buildings, concrete. Can you go play out in the middle of the street? No. No. So yes, so that's why a lot of people wanted to move from the cities. Also back then, cities were very dirty. We've kind of fixed this now with laws and everything about the environment. But back then, in the 1950s and before, cities could be very dirty and smelly. There's lots of cars. Cars weren't as environmentally friendly as they are now. Businesses weren't as environmentally friendly, so there was lots of pollution. It was dirty, it smelled bad, there were lots of people. So that was another reason they wanted to move. They wanted to move where there was grass, there was space, the air was cleaner, there weren't as many people or cars or factories. But now, people are moving back to the cities because do we have to deal with those things as much anymore? Like the pollution and the dirtiness, and even in a lot of cities, the space issue. No, because here, we can live right in the middle of the city and still have space. Good, thank you, Carla. Keep reading. Smith.
Many suburban.
Oh, wait, hold on. I need to make sure
go to
everybody's
the city.
following along. Sorry, Smith. It's going to take me a minute. Everybody, finger ready. Smith, I'll tell you when everybody's ready. Okay, everybody's getting there a lot quicker. Go ahead, Smith. Make sure you're following along.
Many suburban people go to the city for work or entertainment. City people often travel to the suburbs to shop at malls.
So what that means is a lot of people in the suburbs, well, because there's mostly just houses and more space, there's not as many businesses, like places where you can work. Offices, factories, whatever. So that means the people from the suburbs come into the city, and that's still true today. Zari and Cullen, you guys come from suburbs of suburbs, and you guys probably, if you come at a different time, you probably hit a lot of traffic.
Yes.
That's because there's lots of people coming from the suburbs and the suburbs of the suburbs to come into the city to work. And then on the way home, you hit that traffic again because there's lots of people leaving work or school to go back out. But then it says city people often travel to suburbs to shop at malls. Well, especially a mall is what? Think about the size of a mall. It's really what? Big. So when a big city like New York has lots of buildings and apartments and stuff like that, can they fit a mall in the city necessarily?
No.
No. So to go to those big stores, like the mall and like the big Targets and the big Best Buys and the big Office Depots, a lot of people in bigger cities have to go out to the suburbs where there's space for those big giant stores. Here, again, in Memphis, we don't really have to worry about that because is Memphis as crowded as like New York or Chicago or Los Angeles? No. But in a lot of places, people do have to live, they live in the city and they have to go out to the suburbs to go to the mall. Sometimes we do that too because there is a mall. The Wolf Chase Mall is in Cordova,
Yes.
which is a suburb. So sometimes if you want to go there, you go out to the suburbs. Also, IKEA is out in the suburbs. And Walmart is out in the suburbs. And a lot of other places that you may want to shop are out in the suburbs. Costco is out in the suburbs. Sam's Club, well, actually I think there's Sam's Club in town.
Yeah, there
Smith.
Jackson, Tennessee is a little different though,
Yes,
because it's really spread out.
because it's not really a big city. It's a small city.
True.
But it's also not a suburb because it's too far away. So it's its own small city. It has, well, actually, no. It kind of has suburbs-ish, a little. Maybe we could call them that. Smith?
I know of a suburb,
Of Jackson? What is it? I bet I know it too.
Medina.
Medina. I used to go to
That's
Martin,
where
so
my
I had to
family
drive
lives.
through Medina. I had to drive through Medina every time I went to school and back. Because I went to Martin, so I went up 45. So, yeah, kind of. Medina, that's actually what I was thinking a little. Although it might be its own small town. Maybe more like, there's that little place called Three-Way. That might be a suburb. I don't know. Jackson's not really big enough to have a suburb. So we just kind of be saying it, but it's not quite big enough. Okay, very good. Well, let's learn. We have this thing at the bottom called Children in History. So now you get to learn about what it would be like if you were a child at this time. So Smith, go ahead and read. That last name is Schermerhorn. So everybody, finger ready to follow along. Everybody, finger ready to follow along. We're not there yet. I never said turn the page. And when I see everybody's finger ready to follow along, Smith, go ahead.
Gene Schermerhorn. Imagine New York City with dirt roads, horse-drawn carts, and barns filled with cows and pigs. That is what 23rd Street was like when 6-year-old Gene Schermerhorn moved there in 1848. Young Gene had fun trying to lasso pigs. He also liked to swim in Beekman's Pond.
So we see, before all of these people started coming from all over the world, between about the late 1800s, early 1900s, New York City was basically just a really big farm town. There weren't the big buildings. There were barns. There were livestock. There were crops. There were just little wooden houses. But then we learned in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, people started coming in from all over the world. And once they got to New York, did a lot of them leave? Zari?
No.
No. How do you know? Where does it say that?
On the immigrants to the United States.
Where does it say that? It says it somewhere. We talked about it, how people came to the cities and they did not leave. Oh, you know what? We read that in reading. Where it said, in our reading lesson, it said that people came to Ellis Island and they didn't really leave. They stayed in the cities. So would these farm towns with the really spread out houses, would they fit everybody? No, so something started to change. Smith, keep reading.
The city soon changed. Overhead wires brought electricity to Gene's neighborhood.
Make sure you're following along
Barns
with your
gave
finger.
way to tall apartment buildings. Streets were paved and Beekman's Pond was filled in so a new street could be built. Gene's family moved away. When he was 45 years old, Gene visited his old city block. He could hardly believe the changes.
So all these big cities that we know of, where we know there's no trees except for some random parks and there's lots of concrete and lots of buildings, well, they all used to look like out where Cullen lives or where Zari lives, if you've ever been to either of their houses. Even New York City used to look like that. But then lots of people started coming in, and when there's a lot of people, they need housing, and they need grocery stores, and they need things to do, and they need auto shops, and they need all of that. They need electricity. So the area changes. The way it looks changes. More and more things are built to accommodate more and more people. Okay, turn the page. So now we know the majority of Americans started out in what type of area? Americans mostly lived in what type of areas at the beginning when the country first started? Kingston. Rural areas. And then, as time went on, they moved into more what type of areas? Aaron? Urban areas. Then after a little while, they wanted more space, but not as much space as the rural areas gave them because they still wanted grocery stores and a short commute to work. So then they moved to what type of areas? Suburban areas. Very good. So our history goes from rural, out in the countryside, to urban, in the cities, to suburban. Not quite in the cities, but not quite in the country either. So go ahead and turn the page and read next, Victoria.
Moving to warm climate.
A little louder, make sure everybody's finger is following along.
Moving to warmer climates. Just 50 years ago, most Americans lived in the northeastern.
The northeastern, that's a compound word. We've got north and we've got eastern. Put it together, smooth it out, and it's northeastern.
Lived in the northeastern and in the central parts of the United States. In recent years, many Americans have moved south and west. Many have moved there to enjoy the warm climates of states such as Florida and Arizona. Today, 3/5 of Americans live in the southern and western part of the country.
Good. So we know America has like more than 300 million people living in this country, and now it's even more than that. Could they all fit in the northeastern United States, like where they mostly started? You can show me. Definitely not. So as time went on, well, they were forced to move south and west because of the population, but also because the south and the west has a better climate. Think of what we know about if we've seen a movie that takes place in winter in New York City. What's there a lot of? Victoria? Snow, which means it's really what? Cullen?
Cold.
Cold. A lot of people don't like the cold.
No.
So they started moving to warmer climates, like in Florida, and out in the southwest, like in Arizona. So it wasn't just for space, it was also for the climate. So if we look at this diagram on the top of page 46, what does this diagram show? Carla.
It shows the fastest growing state.
The fastest growing states. And we have all 50 states. So how do we know which ones are faster growing? How do we know which states on this map are faster growing? Cullen?
The ones with like a light kind of pink color.
The reddish pink color. The states that are the reddish pink color are the fastest growing. So we see pretty much all the southern Atlantic coast is very fast growing. All the Pacific coast and all of the southwest are the fastest growing. Why do you think people might be moving there? Why do you think so many people might be moving there, Zadie?
Because there's warmer climates.
Because there's warmer climates. What about space?
They might like more space.
They might have more space because do as many people live there as in the Northeast where the first Americans started coming in and a lot of them just didn't leave, even to this day?
No.
No, there's a lot more space. Very good. Okay, Victoria, go ahead and read to us the summary of this lesson.
Immigration has made the United States one of the most
That's a long I. Diverse, which means lots of different people, cultures, all of that.
Most diverse nations in the world today.
A little louder.
Today, Americans have different ways of life and live in different kinds of places. Yet,
Cover up ISM. And what is that word? Who can tell her? Cover up ISM and what is that word? Kingston? Patriot. Now ISM, what is it?
patriotism.
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 It's a verb. It's in the name of the country.
Unit.
Not units. That E makes that I
Unites.
unites. Remember, an E at the end makes a word, makes the vowel before it. There's a vowel, consonant, silent E. That vowel is almost always long. So unites us. So even though we have lots of different people and cultures and we all live in different areas and we are all very different, there are still some things that unite us. Our patriotism, what else? Zadie? Cullen?
Monument.
Our monuments, and Victoria? Carla?
Holiday.
And our holidays. Okay, go ahead and close that. We are done with social studies.